Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Section 9 in our chiropractic seminar. In this section, we will attempt to make a summary and conclusion of many of the wide-ranging ideas which we covered in the past 8 sections. You'll remember that we ended up with this slide asking the rhetorical question, are we going to merely be content with crumbs from the table? Is that what our profession is going to be content with? Are we going to be content with getting the crumbs from the table? Are we a subspecialty of medicine? Are we merely a subspecialty of organized medicine? Or instead, are we really a womb to the tomb, complete paradigm of healthcare, with the exception of emergency trauma, of course? So this is the question that we ended up Section 8 with. Now here's my image for one situation that our profession seems to find itself in today. I call it the great trap. I see this situation in which our profession today is confronted with this temptation, as it were. And it's very analogous to what went on with the osteopaths in the 1960s, and you'll probably remember that at that time osteopathy had a separate identity and a separate philosophy, and they as a group made the decision in the mid-60s to be embraced by organized medicine, and they began to have the ability to write prescriptions for most of the pharmaceuticals that medical doctors write prescriptions for at that time. And then we sort of have seen in the past several decades the decline of that profession, especially the way the general public regards osteopathy today. And I think you would find out that most people, if you ask them what an osteopath is today, they can't really give you a clear answer to that, because I don't think the public has a very clear perception of what an osteopath is, unless, of course, you know, they've been a patient of an osteopath who explained them their original ideas. But that original philosophical identity of osteopathy has been sort of diluted and has been sort of lost over the decades after that profession made the decision to be absorbed into the entirety of organized medicine. And so for ourselves as chiropractors, what I see is this sort of trap being set before us today. And I understand sort of, I have a pretty good idea of most of the aspects of this temptation. I'll try to summarize them. The temptation, I'm sure you're aware that there are a few factions, there are some factions within the chiropractic profession today who feel that it is extremely important for us to cultivate this sort of very medically oriented persona, so that we are offering ourselves up as candidates in their eyes to be. We are now being considered for the same option that was offered to the osteopaths, that we would be able to write prescriptions for a certain class of pharmaceutical drugs, you know, for patients. And there is an entire impetus, a movement, very powerful forces within our profession today who feel that this is the best direction that our profession can take. And I see the motivation behind these factions, and my opinion is that I see the people who are espousing this type of direction are as people who never really understood the original potential, the original identity, the original philosophy and tradition of chiropractic as it has existed as an extremely beneficial and unique service and profession to the general public for the last profession. This group of people who are pushing this sort of agenda never got that idea. They never got that story. And now to me, sometimes I feel as though it's as though they are feeling like, well, since my opinion is that chiropractic, well, since their opinion is that we don't see the value of chiropractic, we never really saw the value of chiropractic because I don't know, we've just been in administration all these years, we've never practiced or whatever. Now we feel, oh well, chiropractic is dwindling, and now we have time to, save chiropractic. And so here's how we're going to save chiropractic. We're going to legitimize it by making them, pseudo real medical doctors by giving them prescription pads. And so I see this as this would be the death knell of our profession, this temptation that is afoot now, because I see that we would lapse into obscurity if we ever lost our professional identity. Parenthetically, my opinion also is that it will never really happen. I really don't think that these hopes will be realized of these factions, because I think we're too fragmented of a profession that will ever be offered that. That's just my opinion. But it seems ironic to me that at the moment that our spark is the faintest, that is the time that the world needs our message the most. As we will see, never before has the world in general needed chiropractic as much as it does now. We are subluxated as a people in so many areas. Does the world need chiropractic today? Does the world need chiropractic today? Well, let's talk about that for a minute. Here is a chart that I got from Thomas Hartman's book, The Last Hours of Ancient Sunlight. And in this graph, we are taking a look at world population. That's what he's really doing. So we're looking at the appearance of billions of people on the planet. So we see that it took, from the beginning of time to the year 1860, well, that's how long it took to get 1 billion people on the planet. And then to get the 2nd billion people, it only took, 70 years? And then you can trace the chart right up. So that today we have just passed the 7 billion mark. There are 7 billion people on Earth today. And I look at this chart, I use this chart in many of my seminars, in my nutrition seminar, in my immunology seminar, and also in this seminar, because it answers so many questions, so many unknown questions. We can't understand the reason why we decide on these particular policies, either as a profession, as a government, as different groups. Why are these policies being chosen today? And keeping this chart in mind answers a lot of questions for me. I feel that there is a real sense of disconnect, a generalized sense of disconnect, especially in this country today, in so many areas. In the area of politics, certainly. I really don't want to get off on that tangent, but it just seems like there's a real distrust and a disenchantment between the general public and their sense of that they can really have an effect on policies that are being chosen either in their state capital or else in Washington, and the direction that is headed today. In the area of economics, there's a disconnect between so many people today. I get this sense that people feel that it is the huge monoliths, the huge concerns, the vested interests that are controlling so many areas, for example, in food production, definitely in the areas of medicine and pharmaceuticals. So many of our policies are controlled by ideas about war gear, sales of war materials. All these huge vested interests have very powerful influences on the economics of today, and sometimes I feel people feel a disconnect between their ability to have any effect on that. A disconnect with media. media has become so scientific in the worst sense of that word, meaning that it's just a group of superficialities. People rely on, it's headline chasing in order to understand the most serious and significant events of today. And so when someone actually is encouraged to, or is motivated to really study a certain issue deeper and to a very deep level, sometimes when you really study any given issue, you realize how much you've been deceived because you thought it was much different than this, because all you have been doing is chasing headlines, as it were, being superficially informed in these areas. And now when you start to look just below the surface, you see that it's completely different from what everybody thinks. And so this disconnect and this distrust with media, that's one thing that's leading to the lowering of the attention span of people. People read a headline, they read some quick story that's on, Yahoo News or Google News or something, and they dismiss it like, well, that might have happened, but it might not also. So just a distrust and a disconnect from media today is a phenomenon that I see growing. The ecology, the environment. I feel that people are sensing a disconnect. They're beginning to understand the way that the green movement, for example, has been hijacked by vested interest and the pretense that we are doing everything for the benefit of the environment. But then again, if you look just a little bit below the surface, you'll see that it is just the opposite, that so many things are being covered up to the ultimate detriment of the ecology and the environment. So people are becoming distrustful of that as well. So where does chiropractic fit into all of this? Well, it is chiropractic whose goal it is to reconnect, to reconnect the spirit with the physical. This is a quote from D.D. Palmer here. "Life is but the expression of spirit through matter. To make life manifest requires the union of spirit and body." And so this is the connection with the neurophysiological ideas that we are discussing, how the adjustment will reunite the neurological properties of the brain with the disconnected areas of the rest of the body. So this is how I see the need for chiropractic in the world today is so general. In my opinion, about 99% of the time, you will have success with a patient using a combination of chiropractic, legitimate, effective, traditional chiropractic care and lifestyle change. Using a combination of these two therapeutic regimens, let's say, you will experience success in the majority of patients, provided that they actually adhere to the program. So this is an amazing statement to be able to even postulate, and I don't believe that there is any healthcare profession or healthcare paradigm in history that could even come close to making a statement like this. Now, as we know, healthcare costs are skyrocketing out of control. We're no longer to afford the types of healthcare that are reliant on the types of services that we have felt necessary to provide in the past. So the tendency today, it seems, is that what they want is a much lower level of, quote, health care for a much greater number of people, because the way it is now, the system is going bankrupt, and that's why healthcare costs are exponentially rising today. And this is, of course, paralleling health insurance costs, and we see doubling and redoubling of insurance premiums as time goes by. And so the obvious answer to this problem, solution to this problem, is to try to stay healthy in the natural way, to stay healthy in ways that don't involve hospital visits, that don't involve unsuccessful regimens of drug therapies, drug regimens, which we're seeing they are admitting are detrimental to great numbers of people. Here is a statistic that, as far as hospital dangers are concerned, here's a statistic that you can find on the CDC website today. The number of people who die in American hospitals every year from diseases they acquired in the hospital and infectious diseases which are completely unresponsive to all known antibiotics, that number is 80,000 deaths, according to CDC. So these are just a few reasons why it seems like a very good idea to do everything possible to encourage the person to support the natural healing powers of the body. And chiropractic is certainly the largest healthcare paradigm that encourages something like this. Now here is an example of what I'm talking about here, the advantage of chiropractic, the value of chiropractic, not just financially but physically as well. This is an article from 2010 JMPT. It's your note number 41. Your note number 41. You'll remember that the notes are listed on the left-hand column of my website, thedoctorwithin.com. Just scroll down till you get to Notes to Seminars. And then this is your note number 41 for the chiropractic seminar. This is from 2010 JMPT. This is an analysis of 400,000 disc surgeries per year in this country, the McMorland study. And their findings were this. The bottom line was that 60% of these disc cases have favorable outcomes from chiropractic as an alternative to surgery. So they took large numbers of these cases, people who had been recommended to have lumbar disc surgery, and they said, well, okay, we're going to try chiropractic on these patients first and see if we can avoid surgery. And 60% of the time they found that they could avoid surgery because they had favorable outcomes from chiropractic. In my personal opinion, that's an extremely low figure. In my own experience, it's been closer to 90 or 95. But this is what this study found, 60% favorable outcome from chiropractic as an alternative to surgery. And then they did some math here. They said, okay, let's say of the 400,000 disc surgeries per year, 60% of those would be 240,000, all right? And let's multiply that number of cases by $70,000, which is the approximate amount that it costs for disc surgery, and we come up with the figure $16 billion. This is just in low back disc surgeries alone could be saved if people would try courses of chiropractic treatment for the disc cases. So this is an amazing statistic because it makes you realize that the majority of people who have two lumbar disc herniations, bulged disc, disc trauma, that they are not going to chiropractors. They're not even considering chiropractic care first. If Motrin and other stronger pain drugs don't work, that they are going under the knife. Now here's another study. This is from 2012, the journal Spine. This is your note number 60, the street study in the journal Spine. The title was Morbidity and Mortality of Adult Spinal Surgery, This was an analysis of 942 patients. So it was a pretty large study. And here were some of their conclusions. So I encourage you to read the whole study, but here were some of their conclusions. That 822 of these 942 patients had at least one documented complication. Complication is another word for an error in the surgical procedure. They use that it's kind of an Edward L. Bernays term. Complication means a mistake was made in the surgery. Okay, so this comprises 87% of the total number of patients had at least one complication. In 58% of the cases, it was elective surgery. So the patient chose the surgery. They could have avoided it, is what I'm saying. 14 of these people died on the table of the 942. 10% of them had surgical complications during the operation. Surgical complications during the operation itself, including 4.5% who had incidental durotomy. That means they accidentally cut the lining to the spinal cord. They accidentally sliced through the meninges. Oops, sorry. 1.9%, almost 2%, had hardware malposition requiring revision. This means that they made a mistake during the surgery that forced them to cut the patient open again, requiring another surgery. 2.2% of these cases lost more than 2 liters of blood during the operation. So how much blood is in your body? How many liters in your body, right? The percentage of post-operative complication was 73.5%. So 73.5% of them had complications after the surgery, including 13.5% wound complication, 7% got pneumonia as a result of back surgery, right? And neurological deterioration that was permanent occurred in 3% of cases. So these are 2 very good studies to become familiar with when you're trying to understand yourself and also be able to explain the value of chiropractic care. This is just a small part of what chiropractic can do. This is only for the acute lumbar disc patient. So please look at those 2 notes, 41 and 60. Success today. So what I've discovered is that the fear that we see so much, and the desperation and the lack of confidence that we're seeing among a lot of chiropractic organizations. We're seeing a lot of that within the schools today, within chiropractors themselves, especially young chiropractors. They don't see how they can possibly make it. They don't see chiropractic as like it was in the 80s, where it was a profession that you could be pretty confident if you became competent in this skill and art and science of chiropractic, that you could be successful in it. People have a fear of that today, and that's why they're becoming desperate and thinking about things like trying to get prescribed drugs. But what I have seen across this country, as I lecture all over the country and many other countries today, is these pockets of awareness that I talk about on my website. Pockets of awareness. There are many groups of chiropractors who have found these, I guess, courses of instruction from some very capable people who have shown them. Well, first of all, they had a basic understanding of they had to have a basic understanding of the value of chiropractic, but then these courses of instruction showed them a very specific technology for business success, which is something that the students get nothing of in school. And these and it is hundreds of chiropractors, and they're not all confined to one area of the country, although they do seem to be concentrated in certain areas of the country, but they can be anywhere. And these doctors who are fortunate enough to hear this message at the right time and to follow the instructions of these courses, they're very successful, and they are doing capacity services with as much services as they can, as they can handle personally, during a week's time, and they're doing just as well as some of the really successful practices in the 80s and 90s, from what I can see. They're still taking exotic vacations because they deserve exotic vacations, because they're doing the work, they're performing a service for hundreds and hundreds of people. That is still able to happen today. I mean, I see it. It is happening today. These doctors have learned to sort of turn a deaf ear to all the negative conditioning we're getting in media all the time, and these doctors have learned to create their own economy. This is not some kind of theory or idea that I'm hoping about. This is something that I have seen over and over myself. Okay, now let's talk for a minute about confusion about our identity. My opinion is that the identity of chiropractic, what is chiropractic? My opinion is that mainstream media certainly has a generalized confusion about what chiropractic is. Probably for the greater part, mainstream media doesn't have much awareness of the existence of chiropractic, and what little awareness they do have is distorted and incorrect. So they may, when they do mention chiropractic at all, it may be in a very condescending or pejorative sort of mode. Monolithic medicine, it's the same thing. Although there are many cases of individual orthopedists, neurologists, medical doctors who have a relationship with chiropractors where they refer them patients, and also there are many situations where chiropractors are working in hospitals, in general, those are rare, and in general, monolithic medicine seems to have very little awareness of the existence of chiropractic, and if they do, it's incorrect, or else they would belittle it completely, or are very afraid of it, especially if they have knowledge of its success. So that would be a confusion. Bureaucratic confusion about our identity. Now this is something that I see not only within the civil governments, both state and federal, but also within administrations, in schools, sometimes in regulatory bodies. You will see bureaucrats who have never been shown the value, they've never been taught the value and potential or even the identity of chiropractic. They're just getting their personal notion of chiropractic from, I don't know, from wherever they're getting it from, and they tend to be confused about the power and potential of chiropractic, I've noticed. And a lot of times if the bureaucrats, especially if they are doctors themselves, doctors of chiropractic, you will usually see this type of confusion among those who have never practiced. So if you have ever been successful having a practice in chiropractic, then you have a hands-on instinctive knowledge of the power and potential of what chiropractic can do, and you won't have this confusion about our identity. But what I've noticed is that these seem to be the sources of confusion with reference to the chiropractic identity. So we also have sources of clarity as well in the world today. And what would that be? Well, that would include chiropractic websites, places where we can get more clarity about chiropractic. I mean, do a web search for the phrase spinal nerves or subluxation or chiropractic, and you'll have to do a lot of sifting, but you will come across some excellent sites that are very well presented, very clearly stated about the power and potential and identity of chiropractic. That is out there. Same thing with books on chiropractic. There are some very good books that trace the traditional ideas and connect it to the modern neuroscience that corroborates the value of chiropractic today. The notes and references that you see appended to this, in this list, in the left column of my website, The Doctor Within, you click on Notes, and that list of notes to this live chiropractic seminar, I encourage you to become familiar with as many of those references as possible, and that will give you it'll give you a lot of depth in and confidence in the history, tradition, and the scientific value of what it is the chiropractic adjustment can influence. Successful practice, those in successful practice. Well, that's an old David Singer thing. You want to learn about success in a profession, well then you try to cultivate friendships and spend time with people who are successful in that profession. So meet some chiropractors who are successful and try to spend time with them, take them to lunch, learn their ideas about what it is they do, learn their ideas, what is their definition of, what is their personal philosophy, what is their idea about what they actually do with the adjustment on a day-to-day basis. What are they really doing? And this will be very enlightening and encouraging for someone seeking to gain more clarity as far as the identity of chiropractic. The tools for unlimited success. There are, yes, so it's not just something that you're going to fall into. It's not just something that we fall into. It's something that we're, if we're lucky, we're guided to it and we're able to find the tools for success, if indeed success is your goal. But at the very outset, at the very basis, the very bottom, first of all, the chiropractor must learn that there is a story to tell. Chiropractic, there has been a philosophy for the past century that has enabled this profession to exist. It just doesn't, the chiropractor now that he's out of school and now he's out into the world, he doesn't have to invent one. There is something that has carried this profession through for the past century that has enabled it to survive and flourish. So the chiropractor must learn that story exists, first of all. Secondly, he must learn what that story is. He must learn what that story is. And then finally, the new chiropractor must learn how to tell that story. He must learn how to tell that story to the person who has no idea of what chiropractic is and who is just, the two people have met, he says that he is a chiropractor, and the person says, well, what is that? Okay, so now the chiropractor finds himself in the situation where he has to justify his existence, right? To justify his identity. Well, what is the unique service that I as a chiropractor can now provide mankind with, the general public with, that no one else, no other profession can provide? What is that thing that makes the chiropractic identity? So that's how to tell the story. So it's not something that they can delay about. You have about a minute to make that initial impression. So learn how to tell the story. The chiropractor must learn how to tell the story in a very simple way. So this has always been something that I've wondered about. I see new graduates, many new graduates come to my seminars. I've lectured at many schools. And I always ask myself the question, I can't understand, why do these new graduates have to take postgraduate courses so that they can draw the brain-body diagram after spending 4 years in school and just spending $175,000, let's say. And now they have to take a postgraduate course so they can draw the brain-body diagram. I mean, my opinion is this is the very fundamental requirement in order to explain what chiropractic is to someone who has no idea what it is. And then I ask this question as well. have, we talk about all our scientific advantages today. The sciences are science is so advanced, so advanced, so advanced. So I ask this question: have the advances in our knowledge of spinal lesions today improved our ability to explain chiropractic better than BJ explained chiropractic? So that's a serious question that anyone who actually has any aspirations of having a successful practice must confront themselves with. And I can't understand how anyone would possibly think that they could be in practice and have any hopes of that practice enduring with any degree of success without having these two diagrams, in the exam room. I mean, it's utterly inconceivable to me. So we have the spinal nerves chart, and so we're explaining to the patient, we're correlating their injury, their symptoms with the anatomy and the physical wiring of the nervous system. Now we're showing the patient, well, here's the brain, here's the spinal cord, which is encased in the vertebrae itself, and these are the branches, the spinal nerves are the branches of the spinal cord, this whole explanation. And what we don't realize, especially the new graduate doesn't realize, is that having seen this chart, a million times himself and being sort of no longer impressed with it, with the sublimity of it, this person that he's talking to is probably seeing this chart for the very first time, and no one has ever explained the whole paradigm of health using this picture, using this diagram. So the importance of being able to do that very clearly, very simply, and very quickly cannot be overestimated, in my opinion. And it's so what I'm saying is, it just astounds me that the young graduates have to go they spend all this money and then they have to go and take courses in order to learn how to do this very essential task, really. And the same thing with the autonomic nervous system, in explaining how the organs and the systems of the body are influenced and controlled by the nervous system. Again, this is something that you can explain to somebody with average intelligence in just a few minutes, and you don't have to talk them into it because it makes perfect sense, because it's logical and it's true. So somebody famous said, I don't remember who it was, philosophies which do not result in action are hollow words and empty phrases. Philosophies which do not result in action are hollow words and empty phrases. Maybe that was Shakespeare, maybe it was, I don't know, BJ, maybe it was Calvin Klein, I don't know who it was. But the action that our philosophy results in, obviously, is the adjustment. So now in the past century, of course, many techniques have come and gone. And these include, I'll just list a few of them and categorize a few of them. The osseous techniques, including Gonstead, upper cervical, diversified, Thompson, motion velocity, that's my technique. Spinal traction, including McManus, Cox, SOT. Dural release techniques such as biocranial, Robert Boyd, crane condyle, Upledger. Tonal techniques including network, Holder, Walker, TBM, Toughness, things like that. Energy-oriented techniques including AK activator, DNFT, things like that. Posture-oriented techniques including biophysics and Mark Simmerant, sort of guerrilla version of biophysics, which I use as well. There are many more techniques than just those on the list. But here's what DD said about that. Quote, vehemently and forcibly, if necessary, awaken your patient from his dream of suffering. That's your note number 43. So we must do something that alters the pattern of the patient in some way, in some technique. DD also said this: a good hand healer must be free from disease. He must have the ability of gathering more vitality than he needs himself and the power to impart it to others. So it's the same, it's the old physician heal thyself idea, right? Now here we have the age-old question, the distinction between manipulation and adjustment. What distinguishes manipulation from adjustment? So I want you to look at this clip here for a minute and see if we can get an idea from an old movie. So here we see, was that a manipulation or an adjustment? We see Gary Cooper and Walter Brennan there in that old movie. What distinguishes manipulation from adjustment? So let's talk about that for a minute. It's the idea of intent. First of all, we have to arm ourselves with detailed knowledge of the anatomy and physiology, and then as we evolve the art of chiropractic, the art of the adjustment, delivering an effective adjustment, what becomes obvious, I guess, it becomes more and more obvious as the years that you've been in practice increases. This actually, personally, the idea of intent didn't begin to dawn onto me until really I was in practice about 15 years. Then the importance of intent began to dawn on me. And here's how it happened to me. You know, all those techniques that we just listed, well, there are many techniques that I have more or less, that I'm very proficient at on that list, and there are some other ones as well. But there are also some techniques on that list and that aren't on that list that chiropractors do, and I never had confidence in those techniques. In fact, it was less than not having confidence in them. I didn't believe in them at all, and I didn't think that they had any business in chiropractic, and I didn't see how they could possibly work. So then it was really a source of frustration when I would meet patients and they would come in and they would tell me about their wonderful success with chiropractic in the past, and I would ask them, you know, what technique they had been adjusted with, and they would tell me one of these techniques that I had always thought was completely worthless, in my opinion, just because I had never studied it and I didn't understand it. And then after some years thinking that for a while, then the idea of intent and the power of intent began to occur to me. And that is, after you have mastered the physical, athletic skill of administering an adjustment, you know, after your powers of analysis have been developed and then the powers of delivery have been developed, then there is one further component that is going to double or triple the effectiveness of any given adjustment, and that is the idea of intent. At the last, the last half second before giving the adjustment, you clear everything. There's no other distractions in your mind, and at that last half second, you are visualizing exactly what it is you are trying to accomplish in making the reconnection between the the life force shared in the brain and the part of the body or the system of the body that has been cut off by the interference. And so this idea of intent and focus at the last minute is something that, you know, all healers, any healer in any profession, not just chiropractic, who has been doing it for years and years, they will acknowledge this as obvious, and so obvious not even worth talking about, but it is something that there will never be a controlled double-blind study proving its existence. Now, I was recently at Dead Chiropractic Society, at a big chiropractic convention actually in Southern California, and there were several adjusting tables out in the concourse. There would be hundreds of people milling by, you know, on breaks, and so anybody was free to use these adjusting tables out in the concourse. And I was watching the adjusters, various people use the table. I was standing by the tables and I was really closely watching people adjust, and I would see. There's really a difference. You can tell just without talking. You can tell by looking somebody who's been in practice for a long time and somebody who has not been in practice for a long time. And so the falling short that you would see in the people who had not been obviously in practice for very long, I divided into two categories: the excusable things that they did and the inexcusable things that they did, you know, sort of the newer doctors. And here are what I consider the excusable things that they did. They were just basically clumsy and inept, you know, the way I was for the first few years, the way everyone is when you're trying to learn this very difficult skill of adjusting the spine. So that, of course, is excusable because you have to do it for a while because you become proficient. But there were also some inexcusable things that these new doctors were doing that I noticed. The worst of which was certainly the lack of concentration. And here again, it's something you have to learn over the years, but the power of intent is something that cannot be achieved without honing this ability to concentrate. So this is something that you'll never ever even learn about if you don't develop it at the beginning. The other thing is a hurried analysis, just a very sloppy motion palpation and a very heavy-handed, sort of rough, tough a pretense of an analysis. That's something that I also find inexcusable. Obviously, it's something that they have never been taught. This party attitude toward adjusting. So adjusting is not something that should be done while you're laughing with 3 other people. You know, it's a serious thing. Yeah, and so the combination of all these things would sort of eliminate the idea that there could be any power of intent behind an adjustment like that. So this is my slide. There is nothing new under the sun. Our profession has an intention, a focus to get sick people well, a stated purpose to get sick people well. Technique is secondary to the healer as instrument. That was something that took me years and years to learn. Technique is secondary to the healer as instrument. So there are many types of techniques that can be effective, can be really effective in chiropractic once the doctor has mastered that technique. But it is the purity of intention of the healer themselves, the doctors themselves, that is primary in importance in actually delivering a powerful adjustment opinion. So the doctor of chiropractic must develop this personal arsenal, not only of a variety of techniques in which the doctor will become proficient in, but also in the developing the skill of concentration, focus, and intent in delivery. So we must find the lesion, first of all, be very serious about finding the lesion by x-ray, by motion palpation, by muscle testing, by antalgic posture. On the setup, we must, this is one thing that I see even experienced chiropractors, they make a setup on the adjustment, and they create new trauma by the setup is too heavy-handed. It's too forceful. There is a reactive guarding. I mean, the injured area is already in a protective spasm, and now their setup is so invasive, so forceful that they don't even realize that they're creating new trauma and resistance to the force they're about to impart. So again, learning to adjust well is an athletic skill, just like martial arts are athletic skills. It is an art. The fundamentals must be mastered first. You have to make 1,000 errors before you get any proficiency at all. Later come the esoterics. So the esoteric techniques, in my opinion, are something that should be studied after the fundamental techniques are mastered. Are we the only profession that has this as a stated purpose? To get sick people well? And once the sick people are well, they are healthy. Healthy people don't get sick. So I'd like to finish with this quote. There is a force greater than each of us, and each of us can have a share and a harmony and a connection with that greater force. Chiropractic is the only healthcare paradigm ever conceived whose purpose and objective is to facilitate that sublime connection. So thank you very much for listening to this seminar.